Peace, everybody. I am the Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian lecture series. Book available on Amazon. Make sure you grab that right there. All right, so you can read along, read ahead, do all of that. And today is episode 8, and we're talking about the Projector and who is the Elk-Man. All right. As always, I record these live on Facebook first, and then I upload them to YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure that you go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we're going to go ahead and jump into this right now. All right. So I'm going to read through the chapter, and then once I am done, I will go over everything. All right. The Projector. Many years ago, around the first time I met my wife, I came across instructions to convert a smartphone into a hologram projector. It involves constructing an upside-down, transparent, quote-unquote, pyramid using trapezoids cut from the thin plastic of a CD jewel case. By placing a smartphone face up with a video of a four-way reflecting image playing, positioning this pyramidal structure in the center square of the video causes the four images to reflect and combine in the center of the pyramid as a 3D holographic projection. I recognized this possibility with the Syrian image and proceeded to construct the projector. The four images fold into the Elk-Man. All right, so yesterday I demonstrated, or the day before, one of them I showed you on YouTube, the hologram projector. I may show you that again once we get through the chapter, depending on what time it's looking like. But if not, just go back and check it out on the previous episodes. So who is the Elk-Man? Elk has a number of semantic applications that make Elk-Man an optimum name for the role this glyph has played in the symbolism of the Syrian image projector. The first place to look is at the PIE root hel, meaning red-brown, grayish or brownish coloration, or deer, elk, which is then proposed to have contributed to the first element in elephant, also associated with Proto-Berber elu. Red-brown, in particular, is reminiscent of the red-brown-faced people etymology of the Greek word Ethiops or Ethiops, used generally for those dark-skinned peoples living south of Egypt in ancient times. They were also called by Homer the blameless, which contrasts the ultimate etymology of Shem, which comes from to judge, accuse, blame. This is possibly related to the Semites being bound to Abrahamic covenants, while the descendants of Ham and Japheth were only bound by the laws and covenants active through Noah. Variants such as Elg, Elch, and Alg led to a second direct etymology of elk, which refers to Cygnus cygnus, the common swan. This creates an intriguing connection with the swan as the mount of the red-faced creator god Brahma, and his association with the sound in Om. The species name of elk, Alkes alkes, is similarly doubled and leads to the name of a mythical creature used in heraldry, also called Alki. The Alki is a docile, wingless male griffin that was used as a symbol of Jesus Christ in medieval Europe, representing his dual spiritual and material nature. This closely mirrors the imagery of Daniel's first beast, although it is typically interpreted as Nebuchadnezzar II and Babylon. All right. Is that enough for today? Let's keep going. All right. Sneakily, it also encodes the first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence, 11235, in the form of Alki, 1, 12, 3, 5. These numerical connections are continued in the variant Elg from Danish, which gives us 5, 12, 7. If holding a cube so that one of its faces is visible in diamond orientation, tilting it backwards at a 51.827 degree angle reveals the other two front-facing sides, while also foreshortening the top face into a golden rhombus. A golden rhombus is a 2D quadrilateral with the ratio of opposite vertex distance being 1:5. This tilt dynamic suggests a role of moving from 1:1 perception to 1:5 perception in the process of moving from 2D to 3D, or from the dielectric ether inward to the holographic 3D light projection outward. The insertion of the 8 in the center of 512.7 to form 51.827 ties into a powerful semantic that uses the dual application of alki in reference to both elk and geese to describe the simultaneous inward and outward flow of a flat torus embodied by build or destroy in the supreme mathematics. The same theme of a dual perception shift can be carried over to the Sanskrit word for ether, akasha, and the word for shining, kashi, both coming from the same root kash, meaning to shine, to be visible. This firmly positions the akashic mirror of the dielectric ether as invisible, while kashi describes becoming interactive with matter and physicality. By comparison, kush in Sanskrit means sharp, penetrating, mirroring the act of kush being the one who perceived the veil of physical reality with awareness. The sacred kusha grass from this word root is also called darba, which combines dar, tearing, splitting, and ba, to shine. This theme of penetrating or cutting to make things shine is observed in the ritual ichi mark scarification worn by the shining ones, the orisha, in ancient sculptures and ironwork. The crystalline nature of melanin exhibits a property called magnetic anisotropy, which causes its paramagnetic properties to change depending on the direction of the incoming field. This allows properly angled cutting in the skin to give the face a reflective property, hence shining ones. The Igbo History Museum has made a strong case for a relationship between Igbo Ichi writing and Irish Ogham. These numeric alphabet systems are near identical in form but vary in that the Ichi marks appear most often in skin and bone, while the Ogham in related Celtic writing is primarily etched in wood and stone. This is likely due to their pale skin being unable to emulate the same magnetic anisotropic effect of darker melanin. Author of the series The Moor, the Mason, and the Alien, Richard Smith identifies the phrase skin and bone as an esoteric reference to positive ET intervention on behalf of the Moorish legacy, sun-kissed people of the planet Earth. He then identifies the phrase wood and stone as a reference to negative ET interference in global power dynamics. Virtually everything discussed so far about the Syrian image can be related to Professor Catherine Ocholonu and the Igbo History Museum and their investigation of Ichi linguistic geometry and evolution. This demonstrates how the earliest writing was rooted in the use of letter and line shapes that could be assembled into complex geometries. Developing these forms gradually reveals the toroidal field structure of the universe, thousands of years before theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking's similar conclusions. All of this being considered, one final curiosity is found in the round counterpart of the golden rhombus, the golden ellipse. The area of this figure is A equals pi times A times B, where A and B are the semi-major axis and semi-minor axis, which is pi times phi times 1. In this case, the word area itself comes from disputed Proto-Italic origin between to burn or to plow or rake, suggesting a relationship with the same shining concept of Ichi scarification. The area of this object is equal to the area of the annulus created by inscribing the golden eclipse in a circle, then removing the one diameter circle inscribed by the ellipse itself. This relationship gives insight into our perception of the world as a sphere in physical reality, and as a flat plane with a toroidal field while in the OBE state. While transformation between a sphere and torus present a topological challenge under normal circumstances that requires an unnatural cutting and removal of a cylinder from the center of the sphere to produce the torus, this is a challenge that is overcome by the concept of cells and foam, using a quote-unquote holographic approach to preserve the apparent surface while making microscopic shifts and rearrangements. This is why the theme of water and its shifts between states of matter are fundamental in understanding dimensional shifts. All movement between the quote-unquote heavens of our reality construct. In terms of radians, pi is 180 degrees. Applying the logic of duality, such that this figure represents only the Kashi half, but conceals the Akasha half on the other side of the reflection, we would need 360 degrees or 2 pi radians. This results in approximately 582.5 degrees, giving us Hekbe. Considering the transformations found in Elk, Elg, and Elch, Hekbe can be seen as a variation on the cognates Egbe, Ekpe, and Ngbe, the Leopard society. Rather than a cube, the golden ellipse corresponds to a cylinder, coming from to roll. Cylinder is Galil in Hebrew, the source of Galilee, where Jesus began his ministry in the north, before heading south to complete his destiny. This resembles the description of the flow of a torus through its own center, such that the Torah, as a cylindrical scroll, has a complete 3D identity that is fragmented into parts when rolled out as a 2D flat plane. The vulture woman in the south of the Syrian image represents Vega, which appears at the zenith of the sky in North Africa during the winter, but rests on the horizon in South Africa as if falling when traveling from north to south, hence Vega's etymology. As touched on before, the same root kel that produces the Greek form of the root for cylinder is also the source of hell. Hence Jesus' descent into Hades to minister before ascending and transfiguring. The two figures on either side of the Syrian image thus appear to be the good thief and the impenitent thief, two sides of Jesus as the thief in the night. Thief is from conceal, cover, and night is from bare, naked, in PIE. Hence the same nakedness observed in Noah's tent by Ham or Chem is being referenced by Jesus as a description of himself. Noah is from Nun Ach, which encodes the fish symbolism of the ichthys, as well as the nomo, as the propagation or continuation of the light body through one's heir or offspring. The Elk-Man associated with Cush is the continuance of the legacy of Ham Chem. Nun is also the Egyptian primordial sea, positioning Noah's offspring as the unmanifest extending into manifested reality, as per the cross-through etymology of Abara and Eber, from which Hebrew is derived. The inheritance of dark melanin, which would be essential, and also carrying the Ichi marks, which seems to reveal why Jeremiah, whose name means the Lord will raise or exalt, in chapter 13:23, which gives us Mu, suggests that the leopard spots and Ethiopian skins are unchanging parts of their nature or character. Lord is to become aware of turn or revolution. Hence, the verse describes becoming aware of the raising of Mu by turn or revolution, which we earlier associated with the development of speech and language, captured in the 120 lessons in the description of how the Son of Man causes rain, hail, snow, and earthquakes. This important clue tells us why the Greeks turned the name Cush to Ethiopia. This is a clever play on the word ethos, which means character, custom, habit. The easiest way to understand the relationship between the Son's function in the Trinity and the three letters placed in the first triangle / tetrahedron is to think of the word character in terms of printing. A master matrix is used to punch a hole into a matrix that will serve as the mold used to generate a particular character time and again by placing ink into the matrix and engraving the character onto paper, often made with wood. Our traditions were oral because our story was already engraved into our skin as akaraka. Jesus' ministry was like a rolled up scroll of stories with correspondences, but became a misinterpreted scripture written on flat, outstretched paper, like straightening out the curls written in the hair of those with elliptical follicles. Sumerian Eb means shrine, while Egyptian Eb means heart, showing how the symbolism of Solomon's temple falling and leading to the written scripture becoming the mobile temple is a continuance of the African understanding that the soul resides in the heart and records the destiny on the skin using the influence of our golden ratio proportions on its magnetic field to write our spots, quote unquote, using time-release reaction diffusion and localized modulation of visual noise. When we make noise by speaking aloud, we are punching geometric holes in the matrix of space that have corresponding character derived from the 2D shadow of that form. When the 2D representation of that form properly matches the vibration of the 3D object it refers to, that object resonates. As such, sending the sound of the syllables in Om to their proper centers vibrates our entire body, and its piezoelectric properties generate an electric field that can interact with the field of the planet, exchanging information that the subconscious works in conjunction with the self-conscious to interpret clearly. Without proper understanding and pronunciation, it becomes more difficult for those communications from the other side to come through clearly. By throwing the quote-unquote false prophet and the quote-unquote dragon into the quote-unquote lake of fire, Jesus as the character I helps to bring about the revelation that we are already living in heaven on earth, but just need to do some better housekeeping. Okay. Whew. So we got a lot of explaining to do, Lucy. All right, let's go back to the top. All right, so we started with the projector. So then that was a short section. Peace, Jenna. I see you in here. I was waiting to get through the reading so I can look at some of your comments. So let's do some of that stuff before I get too deep in here, because I may answer some stuff already. Now, let me get a sip of water, because that was a mouthful. That's probably one of the most technically dense sections so far. And it is intended to plant the seeds in your head. You don't have to understand everything right this second, because Lord knows that is not how I receive this either. I got it as a download in the process of maybe 15 minutes, and then it has been unfolding ever since. And that was, let's see, it is 20, so it's been over a year now, me just unpacking all of that, of what I saw on the other side, so I could explain it to y'all in language that you could somewhat come to understand. All right, so the whole projector thing. So this section right here is just easier to show you. I showed it on other video, but I think I will do that again. Let me see. That's the Hans Jenny video. That was cool too. If you start every interview, you're not about to do some free advertising on my answer on my live. Well, the next 30 seconds. Got you. Let's see if I can get back to it easy. Let me see if they'll go easy on me today. I doubt it. So what I will do, let's go ahead and type that in. Show you that again, so you can see how this projector works. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Stavario. There it is on the table. All it is made from a CD jewel case. It's placed on my old phone that I had at the time. Here is a close-up of it. I'm gonna turn off the lights in the room so that you can see the projection inside of it. Alright. You can kind of see the little jellyfish in there. Alright. Okay, so you can see it. Once again, I wish all those years, this was like 10 years ago, I wish I had like kind of walked around it so you kind of see how it's 3D when you walk around it. Like a little jellyfish. And then that's what it actually looks like on the screen of the phone. So as you can see, it's like it's a 4-way picture. So the same thing that I was doing with the Syrian image, I instantly recognized that GIF. Let me see if I still have it open. I have to reopen it. Where are you, my friend? This guy right here. So basically, by me seeing that 2-frame animation reminded me of the 4-way image on the phone or whatever, I tried it again. I had to rebuild that little pyramid about a year or two back, and then found that it makes the Elk-Man in the center, and if you flip it upside down, instead of the Elk-Man, you get the vulture lady. Well, this could be a dude and this could be a girl. This could be a dude, that could be a girl, whatever. It could be either way, but to me, it just looked like a little bird with titties, and mouth open, you see a little beak, and then this guy has like horns, or he's raising the roof. He may have, either way. You see how it's got the heartbeat in the middle and all that. That's pretty cool. All right, so that's just a refresher on that. Where did I put the book? All right, so that's all that it's talking about in that section right there. Okay, so let me see. And I called it the Syrian image. It's something I don't really talk about. I don't think in the book, but like when you tilt the Elk-Man picture, like it's hard to kind of show it on camera. But like if you're holding it and you tilt your phone to where it's like the plane is almost flat, what it does is like it'll like squish the image down, like, and you can see it. It looks like two people standing looking at the image. They kind of have like sort of long hairs, like how they depict Syrians, but it also looks like Nilotic people. So it looks like two tall black people from the central Nilotic region looking at this picture like they were making it. So I don't know if that's what it was actually intended to be. I don't know if somebody actually made that stuff, but goddamn, that's what it looks like to me with my professional opinion. All right, let's see. Jenna says, I'm genetically a Celtic from Basque. Oh yeah, I got some Basque too. Genetically Bailey. All that stuff got mixed up in there. And I am my family line of Irish nobles, the O'Carrolls. All right, cool. That's a bit. Let me see what else you got here. You got something on apotheosis. Okay, that's pretty dope there. Hold on, let me see what they say. My comments stuff keeps on sliding or whatever when I'm trying to read it, so it's kind of hard for me to lock in on things. Let's see, apotheosis, vortical energies contorting, plasmoids bursting open, raining down liquid motion, or molten. The solar frequencies are just getting started. Sinusoidal waves affecting all humans. Chaos energies become still and frozen. A brand new heartbeat in unison. Harmonious ataraxia comes over us. Polarities flip. They're now polar opposites. Evolutional collective consciousness. The shift upgraded all of us. We now live in sacred apotheosis. Snap. Dope. All right, cool. Let me see. All right. Boom. It says the Celtic cross. It's the box in which it contains our sight to source. It is all the sacred geometry. There you go. Boom. There's also I didn't mention it in this chapter, but it also ends up getting tied to some King Arthur symbolism as well. But case in point, it is no coincidence that the Igbo and the Irish were using similar writing system, and they say that Ireland is also tied to Eri, which is the being they say came down and taught them agriculture and civilization after the floods and whatnot and all that good stuff. So if you follow the myths, you can pretty much figure out and decode everything associated with that. All right, so let's talk about. All right, so we got some PIE roots, some Greek roots, so on and so forth. All right, so language lesson. All right, so despite what them folks want you to think, yes, there was a time when the languages were united. They got separated, and they will fight tooth and nail to try to conceal the bridge between those languages. To ultimately understand how that happened. So essentially what happens, all right, so all the oral histories tell us that all the oral histories tell us that down here near the equator, near Lake Victoria and the mountains of the moon, which are the source waters for the Nile. All right. They say down here is where, so for the most part, even to this day, Africa has like 5 distinct, what would I call them? I wouldn't even call it tribes. I call it races, really, because it's like it's fascinating that you can generalize the continent and say like everybody looks alike, but like the fact that we've got like A haplogroup, B, C, D, and E like all coexisting and not, like collapsing into each other on the continent, it is very interesting to say the least. But they say all the early hominins that were hanging out in Africa came together right here in this middle region right here, and then that's where speech, hand dexterity, and hippocampal mapping suddenly took a leap forward, and then that's what diverged us from Neanderthal. So it gave us an advantage with communication and tool use. Unfortunately, it also meant weapon use, and we started getting wild after that. All right. So let's see here. All right, so what ends up happening, and then this is actually in the Tribe of Shabazz story, so the same story that they tell in NOI. So the Tribe of Shabazz essentially enters physical existence like down in here, moves up the Nile into the Arabian Peninsula. So in Mecca, and this region right here, this is where we have Y chromosomal atoms. So every single man that is on the planet can trace their DNA to here. So you have to understand there's 2 different quote unquote Eden events. All the biblical stuff is happening up here because that's tracking the male side. But as far as us as a physical creature on this planet, it all happened down here. So for the most part, you'll be able to find the maternal, leads some mitochondrial Eve, but even that's kind of hard because it's so far back that they don't have no idea how far it goes back. They have no idea how long we've actually been around. It's like they can say like, okay, well, you had hominins of this type pop up around this time and blah, blah, blah. But it just as far as having upright walking, 4-limb things that look like us, they have no idea. But what we do know is that the stabilized form that makes us like we've basically been the same structurally for the past I think they're saying 3,000 years at least. They're saying 300,000 years at least at this point. Originally they were saying like somewhere around 100,000, and they started saying around 200,000. Now they've moved it back to even further to around over 300,000 years. But I guarantee they'll keep on finding more before that. But anyways, that happens up here in the peninsula. So we got Sinai Peninsula and we've got Arabian Peninsula up here. We had a divergence. So they usually call it like the Eurasian divergence or whatever else. But what actually happens is you have Shabazz, he takes his people back down now into the jungles of Central Africa or whatever, so that we can adapt to this planet. And the other group stays in Mecca. So pretty much everybody else on the planet is going to diverge from this Meccan group. Whereas here we adapted and got our what they call Negroid features. So our unique hair texture is a shift in, like I told you yesterday, it is a shift in the TCHH gene that is the same genetic shift that causes birds to have feathers instead of scales like reptiles. So if you want to get into all of that lore about bird people and angelic type beings or whatever else or whatever, that's what's happening. It's that gene switch right there, because that's what allows us to more effectively navigate our conscious experience and be able to filter through illusions, if you will. All right, but anyways, so this is what's happening. All right, so the people, they call them pygmies. So pygmies, you know, they're like dwarfs or whatever. So you'll hear a bunch of different myths about dwarfs, and these actually give rise to the leprechaun stories as well. The leprechaun and the pot of gold is tied both to like these like Eschi dwarves and those stories, but it's also tied to the etymology of Olodumare. So Olodumare is the Yoruba word for the supreme being. It's not a different god. Everybody just has a descriptor name for the source of everything, the unmanifest source. And so his name is basically means the pot from which the rainbow comes from, because Odumare is itself rainbow, and Olo can mean like either master or owner, but it's a compound of Olo and Odu, basically like the owner of the pot, the owner of the source, the master of the source of the rainbow or whatever. So you could even look at that as kind of being like a prism, if you will. But anyways, so these dwarves, the Egyptians, the old kingdom had records of, so about 35,000 years ago, they say the gods walked the earth freely. And then, around 25 to 20,000 years ago, there was the scribes of the gods, the descendants of these guys called the Deneg. And so that's how they referred to the pygmies. All right. And this gives rise to words like donk and stuff like that. All right, so what ends up happening when you start talking about Proto-Indo-European language, this constructed language, this reconstructed language that they try to box us out of, what happens is all of the knowledge that's happening throughout this continent is spread out, because the group that was like so you had one group 60, somewhere between like 60 to 75,000 years ago, something like this, where you're having these migrations out. So that group initially separated, and the San people came down here. All right, so we'll write San down here. So the San people come down to South Africa and so on and so forth. They diverge from the pygmies that stay in the rainforest. All right, there's a group that pretty much stayed like that, and they make it all the way out. They live in Siberia, wherever else. So if you find some of those groups, like the who still have that Deni, like the Na Deni Native American tribes, and they're related to the Ket and the Yug and in Siberia, and moved over to Alaska, whatever else. They become the ancestors of like the Navajo and the Apache in the West, and a couple of California tribes and stuff. But that Denny or whatever, I can tell you right now, that stuff has something to do with Tribe of Dan. And if you look at what are they called, Jenna, the beings, like they're basically like the gods up in Ireland. It's something Denny too. Or they use that same word. So that's how you know it. It's always that same root, that Dalet Nun root or whatever. That is tied to these folks. It's the judges. That's the Elohim. All right. So it isn't no fallen angel shit that we're tied to. We're tied to Elohim. All right. And so you notice that in that Elk etymology, you have Elu. And so that same Elu, all right, in Hebrew is tied to the root that ends up giving you both Allah and Elohim. So Elo, and then Elohim is multiple. All right. We got the same set of words. So Olo. So Olo, Oro, Ora, Ra, Re. What were the other ones? Oli, Uli, Uri. All of these words are tied to the same concept, the source of light and sound, if you will. All right, when you divide the direct light up into a spectrum, instead of the single Elo, you get Elohim. So it is us, we're the spectrum. All right. But anyway, so this dung dank, when it gets over the Proto-Indo-European language, what ends up happening is you get, so the word for night, and I talk about this in the chapter, so I can go ahead and knock this out. So night comes from something to the effect of the negu, like this. They end up dropping the dental click in the beginning. You see the same dental click end up turning into GH and like P and F once it gets to like Italy, so proto-italic. And so this is how we also end up with Fenkul and similar words associated with red, just like elk. And then all together, this is how we end up with both the words Phoenician and Phoenix. So it burns up and then rises again. Remember, to burn up is tied to the etymology of this stuff that we've been talking about. All right. But the group that kept the same phonetics in their name are the Fong. They are a Bantu tribe. And then they largely reintegrated with the Pygmies. So this Bantu group that reintegrated with those Pygmies, relearned the forest sciences and all of that good stuff. And they create the Bwiti, Bweri religion, which is this is associated with Biti in Egyptian, which is a nickname for, let's see, which one was which? So this is Lower Egypt. I want to say the B was Lower Egypt. So this is Lower Egypt. So anytime you're dealing with Lower Egypt, you're talking about root chakra and the pyramid. As I demonstrated before, pyramid is actually the word that they use for pharaoh. So it's pera plus mid, so midu, which means speech. So the words. This technically means house. This basically means companion or guardian or pillar or something like this, or head or leader. So in other words, pyramid actually means in the beginning was the word. In the origin was the word. In the source was the word. So it's vibration. So. All right, so that's what they all talking about. They're talking about vibration coming to a single point due to vector equilibrium. That's the exact same science that was abused by people who understood these scriptures and things and created the atomic bomb. So, whoop, there it is. We run the world in America now. And we're going to pretty much end up doing exactly what happened in Mahabharata and then end up blowing everything up again. And then we got to start over. And that's why we got to get these devils in check. You got to get this knowledge of self so you don't blow yourself up. Like when people like me start remembering this stuff, that means we kind of close. You say, oh yeah, I remember we created this whole system before we came into this reality so that we can stop from blowing ourselves up again. Because I hate to break it to you, but you don't go anywhere. You don't need your physical body much anymore, but what happens specifically with an atomic bomb explosion is that it concentrates so much energy and ionizes, which means gives a charge to the air around it that is pretty much functioning like plasma. And if the environment gets saturated enough with positive ions, and despite how it sounds, that is not a good thing. So positive ions are essentially emitted by all of your electronics, hydrogen plasma is like that. So it means that it loses its only electron, and so it's not able to physically interact with the environment, but it is present, and it can, under the right conditions, it can cool and then become physical matter and stuff like that. So imagine that you are, all right, well, better yet, you ain't got to imagine nothing. I tell you straight up. So your entire experience of consciousness and reality, all of the chemical activity that goes on in your brain that you know all about, you know this is a reality. You know you can disturb the chemical reality by taking certain substances. You know this to be true. All of that is ionic activity. It is all exchanges of charged particles throughout the body. So, in other words, what's happening inside of you is a microcosmic version of these high energy plasma activities that are happening in space. You know what else is made out of plasma? Stars. In Chinese, the word Xing, it can mean star. It's also associated with reincarnation. It is also associated with the star shape, specifically that 5-point shape. So that's you. Arm, leg, arm, head. That's the part of you that is star shaped, the way that ions move through your body. All right. So imagine that you have an environment because of this nuclear activity and all the different electronics and stuff that we've built up because civilization has gotten mad advanced. Essentially, the air is so saturated that you could literally, let's just put it this way, consciousness starts leaking. So the filter between what you consider to be part of you and what's separate from you, it starts to fade such that it's almost a dreamlike reality. So you can imagine that if there was a time where people were actually seeing stuff like angels and blah, 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 it's because the filter between our inside and our outside wasn't as gated as we would need to be able to have, a basic experience of this reality. When you go near sources of moving water like rivers or the ocean, they have the opposite. They have negative ions. And these are the good guys. Because what they do is they neutralize the positive ions that you're being bombarded with all the time due to electronics and cosmic rays. And so that helps to keep everything nice and balanced. I'm pretty sure if you only had these and then none of this stuff going on, you would just imbalance yourself in the opposite direction. But to some degree, you have to neutralize this. And so when you neutralize an ion by bringing a positive one and a negative together, you get a crystal. So incidentally, this same word in Chinese, like the same way that they basically use 3 suns. They use the sun glyph 3 times in order to depict stars, which also means initiates. It's cool. But crystal quartz is one of the other meanings of this. So they understood the crystallization of ions, plasma, is what gives you quartz. And quartz is a highly piezoelectric material under the mountain of the moon. Mountain of the Moons I was talking about in Central Africa, there are very extensive quartz veins, and whenever there's like seismic activity and stuff like that and lightning activity, it causes current to flow through those veins, and the nearby gold deposits that are in like water, underground water and stuff like this. These deposits of gold, they clump together, they come together, and so you find these huge nuggets of gold. So when you get these stories, these like Anunnaki stories of, having to build water courses and to mine gold, this was initially being done on a spiritual level, just like the way that the planet is designed. But on the other side, it looks like you got some beings employed to do this, but we change the external so this whole geological form of this, we condensed that into a human body. So this idea of making bodies for ourselves, we are the Anunnaki who made our own bodies. It wasn't no separate thing, but it's basically like an avatar situation, because like the vast majority of our existence is more like what I just described, with like that ionic environment, being able to do what you do during dreams and OBEs or whatever. That's majority of our existence. This right here that we doing here is like a game where we put constraints on it. So this is an avatar body that we're using. All right, don't let them think you separate from those avatars they talk about in the Hindu lore. All right. So that covers that. So then that word ends up becoming Ethiopian. It was not just the one country, it was the whole bottom half, the equator and everything below it. Called them the blameless ones. They were not the accused. They were the accusers, the judges. So Don and Shin. Are you the accused? Are you the judge? Which one are you? Are you prosecutor or judge? The devil is the false accuser, and the Hashatan is the accuser. So that's the prosecutor. You're supposed to be the judges. All right. And so when they said trying to make a name for themselves, trying to make a Shem for themselves, they were saying they're trying to make earthly judges, as opposed to using the actual math and the computing and things of that nature that we had at our disposal to communicate directly with the natural, what's the word I'm looking for? The natural probability field. All right. It's all about them electrons, y'all. So it's computing. All right. We'll talk about them. So Cygnus. All right. So I talked about vegan, whatever else. All right. So as the Lord goes, I talk about Deneb. All right. And that's what they say, like the Mu people came to Earth about 53,000 years ago or so. That became the Native Americans. Bop, bop, bop. That's what they say. Notice that then and there, this has to do with the tail of the hen. All right, and the hen in question is the constellation Cygnus. So, all right. And then Cygnus is one of 3 bird related constellations. So Lyra and its brightest star Vega are one of them. Then you got Aquila down here. Aquila has, so, and then you got 3 stars in there. So Deneb and Altair are the 3 stars that form the summer triangle. If I recall correctly, it is Sirius, Procyon, and then Betelgeuse in Orion that form the winter triangle. So you got the winter triangle on one side of Orion. You got the summer triangle over here, right here. So Cygnus is the goose or swan. The goose or swan just happens to be the mount, the animal related, the totem associated with Brahma. Brahma is himself associated with the electron. So proton is Vishnu, neutron is Rudra or Sirius. Brahma, the creator, is associated with the electron. So there's a probability field. Probable placement of something. So it's particle duality. You got the wave form and the particle form. That's what is involved in. All right. And so Brahma. So dually, depending on which version you read, how old it is, either Brahma or Surya, the sun, gives birth to the current Manu. Well, Brahma definitely gave first to the first Manu. So that's the intellect, that's the logos. The current one that drives humanity, the current logic of humanity comes from the sun, Surya, and gives birth to Manu. Now, alternatively, Surya also gives birth to Shani, which is the very black representation of Saturn. And then for the, so I told you Shing had to do with star. So Saturn is two Shing. And so two has to do not just with earth, but in the spirit in the mound. And that is the exact etymology of God and PIE. All right, so basically it's talking about this God of the stars, God of the incarnation, God of the earth. So essentially what it's describing, to get past like all of the mystical language surrounding it, is basically talking about cymatics, because this same star-like shape, this like 5-petal looking, I did it very badly. Hold up. 5-petal type of form is formed by 15.66 hertz frequency, which is the octave of the Schumann resonance, which is the natural resonance of sound bouncing back and forth between the earth and the lightning strike activity. All right, so if that's going back and forth long enough or whatever, it'll start to amplify in that way, constructive interference, if you will, and it will cause shapes like this to start forming naturally on the planet. All right, and it'll start shaping, and then this is also the same frequency range of your theta waves, so your alpha and theta waves that you have when you're in meditation. All right, so in other words, it's basically shaping your brain waves, something like this or whatever, so that you can have pattern recognition of your own entire body. It is how you interface with it. But like I told you before, that is arm, leg, arm, head, hence Allah. 66 right there is the abjad / gematria for Allah. Like if you add up the letters in the Arabic name, that's what you get, 66. This is also Siwa. So 60 is Sin, 6 is Wa. Siwa / Siwa / Shiva is where we get the name Shiva. The neutron. Originally, Shiva was not a proper noun. It was a descriptive word, so an adjective used to describe fire. And it described it as kind, good, auspicious. All right, so goodness. And this was a word in Bantu language meaning exactly that, thousands of years before it ever appeared in the Vedas. So before it was used for the first time in the Rig Vedas, it was already a Bantu word. So those languages are very, very connected, and they were connected before the Bantu split from the other Niger-Congo groups like the Igbo and the Yoruba and all of them. So they all had a shared proto-language, because you have words that pop up in those languages too. I mean the same thing. All right. So all this stuff is connected. Don't let them bullshit you, y'all. That the negu word I was talking about, they give you night, it actually means naked. So the nakedness of the garden, the nakedness of Noah, it was actually talking about becoming bare of the sun. All right. Moving the sun, covering, tent. Outcast, we talked about that. Talked about the symbol I showed you yesterday or the day before that about the symbolism of Jesus Christ associated with the Alki, which is a wingless male griffin. All right. So basically, the description that they associate with Nebuchadnezzar 2 in Daniel chapter 7, that is the same description that is given for Christ in European heraldry. So think about that. The one who destroyed the Temple of Solomon, where they were doing animal sacrifices and stuff. You know why that happened? It's because you don't need to do animal sacrifices to another deity if you understand that you and Allah are one. And your only thing that you need to give is loving kindness, chesed, which is siwa. So you don't need to use fire to sacrifice some physical thing. It's telling you, Agni, element of fire, is the emergence of form and visibility. It has not yet become stable tangibility. It's form and visibility, which is will, essentially. And what allows you to perform will is the thermodynamic properties of your body, being able to have a closed system such that energy can stay in there, give you enough stability to be able to make choices, control what's going on inside your body. All right. And so by you recognizing that and that the same thing is flowing through all of us to animate us or whatever, it has a tendency, like when you really, really get it, when it really clicks, the consequence tends to be compassion. But the other element that comes along with that, love. So the root dod for David, in addition to that having the gematria of 464, which is the elements of a tetrahedron, and in addition to that being how water molecules arrange themselves and it being the way stars arrange themselves, dod means beloved or desired. The word desire comes from de sidere, which means from the stars. That is your love is part of the design, all the way on the fundamental level. So this is what they telling you need to get. You need to get like this. Getting a linguistics lesson out here, people. Let me take a break real quick and look at my comments real quick and see what Jenna talking about. Yep. So figure we got some stuff about. Okay, yeah. There you go. And then now here's the other thing. I ain't talking about it too much in there, but then one other thing that's pretty crucial that people don't think about. So they try to shit on the tribe of Dan, but what happened was they divided. So you had the ones that stayed in the north and were doing whatever, idolatry they accused of or whatever, and they assimilated with the Assyrian Empire. But you had a bunch of them that left and then went down to the southern kingdom and they integrated with Judah. Dan was originally associated with the symbol of the serpent. Those who matured, became elevated, became exalted. They started taking on the symbol of the eagle. That is esoteric for the initiate who has now become fully realized. So these are one and the same. So this is these guys ended up being the fusion of the lion and the serpent. So you end up getting the whole Yaldabaoth thing, the demiurge type of situation. And this thing is pretty much like a donkey-headed dude. Donkey head that was associated with Seth, who was also associated with the Caucasian god Hesh, which is a marine god. So this basically represents chaotic waters. The first ever depiction that people associate with Christ is the Alexamenos graffito, which features a figure with a donkey head on a tile cross. So they didn't draw crosses with actually it was a T, so it was a tile, meaning marker sign. So it's the symbol of the donkey head is what they tell you. The ass. Incidentally, the same symbol that can mean guardian, companion, can also mean donkey or ass. So the house of the donkey, the house of the companion, which is the heart. All right, and then if Dan comes down here, becomes the eagle, and then fuses over here with the lion. I forget what the word is. It's not Simha, because Simha is the Sanskrit one, but the Hindi the Hindi cognate to Simha for lion in Sanskrit is also another one of those meanings associated with seeing. So this whole idea of the stars and whatever else, remember the messianic prophecy, it said that a star would rise out of Jacob and a scepter would rise out of Israel. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about the lion. The exalted lion has fused with the eagle. That means that the lineage was both Dan and Judah. In fact, because of all the mixing and blending, so including Judah themselves, at least 9 of the tribes fused. And then the other 3, they assimilated in different various ways or whatever. And it wasn't linear. But what ended up happening, when Ezra and them came back from Babylon, they started talking all that white supremacy shit, talking about you can only marry other Jews and this, that, and the other, and you can't mix and blend with this, that. And everybody had mixed already, and they had mixed families and had other original people who were living in their homeland and stuff. So they had all mixed and blended. And so when this whole racial purity thing started coming along, you had some people who went along with it, but tribes like the Limba and those who were like Judean type folks, like the Beta Israel and Ethiopia and all of them kind of people, and likely several other tribes, which I would say included like the Fong or whatever, but basically a lot of Bantu folks and folks from Yemen and saying all that stuff. So all them same group, priestly group that was tied to the Levites. So Levites blended in with Judah. These are descendants of Moses' brother Aaron. Moses himself married her father was Median, I believe it was. I forget what the other groups were, but basically like Arabian. So he had Arabian wife, so the sons would have Arabian. So they coming together, and that's where all this line comes from here. And yeah, so these were Judeans at the end of the day. So that's what happened to the tribe of Judah. And so the tribe that, the ones that Christ came out were the ones that had this blend of, where all the tribes came together. So that's why we have the parallel stories in the Zulu shamanic oral tradition where everybody came together near the mountains of the moon. That's where the language was born. That's where the word was born. The current logos. So remember, they called Christ the second Adam. So there was the new body. The other one that got corrupted, Christ's body, is the second Adam. We, like I explained the other day, we as African Americans are a second coming because we are the only people on the planet that fuse everybody together without choice. The last time that happened was when humans were just kind of made in the first place, because it wasn't by choice, it was by evolution. But everything else, if you ended up looking Chinese, if you ended up looking Caucasian, if you ended up wherever else you went and you adapted, that was by choice. You migrated there. Even if it was bad weather, you still made the choice to go instead of staying. We were kidnapped. We were forced to breed. We were raped. All this stuff, forced integration. And then ultimately what you messed around and did brought the second coming of the original people. So that's why they call us that. Alrighty then. Just setting the record straight. Setting the record straight, y'all. Okay, so I talk about this tilting. This was one of the first revelations I had, with like the angle necessary in order to tilt a square, tilt a cube, and then it have like perfect 5 proportions. All right, so 5 rhombus, and then for whatever reason in the dimensions of that thing, when I make it into a ellipse, dimensions of that give us 582.5 degrees. X, Y, Y, H, E. All right. There's a few things you can do with that. More precisely, this is 582.49. So when you do it like that, that is she, which is the Latinization of a word for chameleon. As I broke down the other day, chameleon gets his name, lion of the earth. Sometimes they call it a serpent, but that's because of like the little hood thing it has on his head. The same semantic ends up being associated with asp, such that that means both cobra and shield. All right, shield is also the meaning of it's a Maori word. Hold on, is it Maori? Yes, a Maori word. Horo. Greeks ended up making it mean time. They ended up making it mean shield, and then the Munda people in central India made it mean man or human. The common link there between horo and holo and words like that is that this is actually related to, and so they are the hu, uru, ku people, which means the I am from the utterance of a lion or leopard. Ku in Proto-Yoruboid comes from to growl. You take that growl and you fuse it with udu, such that you have kudu. All right, and then this gives you a word having to do with master, ownership, and blood. But more importantly, the root udu again was pot or source. It's the source blood. And it shows you that and this means leopard, by the way. So this whole idea of a leopard is tied to Namor, who united Upper and Lower Egypt. And there's the source of Nimrod, son of Cush. So descendants of Cush. So the second coming of Cush. His name has nothing to do with the root murd for rebellion. That was completely made up in the books that came after the Torah, because all they tell you is that he is Cush's son and he was a great hunter. And that hunter is important. It's bow and arrow, all of that stuff, because the etymology of Torah has to do with shooting and casting. It's talking about the person who can speak. All right, the Ekbe Society, the Leopard Society, they are the ones who use the Nisabiti script that they use for the writing system in the Black Panther movies. That means he of the Sage and Bee, he who is of Upper and Lower Egypt, meaning the fusion between the heavenly nature and the bodily nature. That is the Griffin. That is the Alki. All right. In those times, the same word, Ru, it comes from, what's that word? I know Ero is one, Arwe. It's like words like that, but they all mean like wildcat, lion, leopard. Like it's the same word that's used for all of it. All right, and let's see. In other words, the Lion of Judah could have easily been a leopard too. They're basically telling you in Daniel 7 how the symbolism transformed over time as it exchanged hands, because people didn't know how all the etymologies were connected. Because the same word ngo that means leopard in Congo, it comes to mean shield in Kikuyu. So in two different Bantu languages, you end up getting either leopard or shield. And like I told you, shield has to do with the cobra. So the idea of the cobra and the lion being interconnected is basically to help them remember how things ended up getting translated. In the African sphere, the serpent represented snake. No, excuse me. The serpent represented word or membrane. So it's like, so you have the shield, that which protects you, and that which helps you produce the word. So you see how my lines on my hand has forked right there and stuff. It says Yah. So that's YA. That's where it comes from, y'all. Yah. It literally. So Yah is literally the word. So the letter, the 10th letter in Arabic, Yah, is it means like chief or head or leader or whatever else, but it corresponds to the Hebrew word yod or yud or whatever, which also happens to mean hand. All right. So in other words, the companion writes your destiny onto your hand as akaraka. That is a Igbo concept. So your divine spark writes your destiny onto your hand. As you can see, my hand says hand. That's how you know. All right. Anything else I want to talk about? Ether. I talk about Akash and how Aka and Kush and all these words are tied together. Shining One, how all of that ends up getting smashed into Nakash, which is the Shining One, the diviner, it made him a serpent in the garden, but it's a person with the ability to do divination. So that is exactly how the priesthood used to communicate with God. They used to draw lots called Umim and Thumim. Once the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in from 587 to 586 BCE, they no longer knew how to use binary to speak with God. Therefore, the decisions had to be made by councils. But what they did is, up until that point, every time they made a decision, they wrote that stuff down to say, okay, when the oracle tells us this, or whatever, this is what God is telling us. When they no longer had that, they closed the canon, and so that became the canonical Torah. That means that anything after they closed the canon, after those 5 books, it's stuff that was made up by other people. Like, some were well-meaning, some weren't, but it wasn't done with the mathematical association, with the probability field associated with the creator, which I just told you about with Brahma. All right, so that's just what he's called over there, but conceptually, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the one that gives rise to the logos, that gives rise to the logic for this particular era of man. All right, I got into the whole Celtic and Igbo intersection right there. Talked a little bit about this. Hey, that's an interesting book. So the More, the Mason, and the Alien, it's another one of those where it's like, I think it's largely channeled on his part. He does some research and stuff like this, but once again, it comes down to whether or not you have been initiated to know what these things are showing you. So, but he's got enough of the right information in the right place to where if you're somebody who knows some of the more details of the initiation systems in Africa, you can pretty much decode what he's saying pretty accurately. You can pretty much get where you need to go. They understood the structure of the universe, because what happens is that if you go through certain practices, you can actually see the way that your brain is mapping space around you. It's a grid, like a hexagonal grid. Say, well, it's an easier way to draw this. Hold on. Let me see if I remember how to do that. Oh yeah. So all you gotta do is so you see that's a toroid, a donut, something like that. But then it makes like all these little hexagons on it. But that's essentially how your interrenal cells and your hippocampus are mapping. Like it's basically breaking up your surroundings into a honeycomb, like a little honeycomb looking thing. And then it uses that information in order to store memory, and then you're basically recreating it. But they figured out that that's what the entire universe is shaped like as well. And then Stephen Hawking ended up theorizing and showing quite compellingly that that is in fact what the shape of the universe is like, the grid of it. So that goes to tell you that our collective consciousness is generating this reality. And we've kind of agreed that, hey, there's just certain stuff that we don't want running around here, so we're going to block that out in our perception and have the rules be stable and all of that. The word for stability, Ululu, it is both a Babylonian word and an Igbo word, and they try to make it out to seem like they're not connected. But it is the anchor for the calendar. So Ululu is, let's see, 1100 in binary. That is 33 of the spine. That equals 6. And Ululu is the 6th month, and they double it up. They do it twice. So there you go. The Abjad for Allah is embedded in there. But Ululu is basically the stability, the anchor. Once you are anchored, in fact, the name for the moon god Sin is written as Shesh Ki. Shesh means 6 in Hebrew. So it's talking about Ululu. So the tether of the earth. Ki means earth. They keep telling you that they don't know where Sumerian came from. We walked our black asses over there and we wrote it. That's what happened, or whatever. But this is the exact same concept as the Alamur. So the earth spirit I talked about before, or whatever. The layer of spirit on which the moon rests. It's called the Alamur, and it's called the womb of Allah. And this is where spirits return, so they can get circulated like a toroid once it's your time to come back. The covenant that we have, the promise that we made, so on, so forth, is to return. So we return so that we can take care of our family. So in Africa, it is understood that we reincarnate into our same family. So you'll have a child that displays certain characteristics and marks of an ancestor, and then they have a means of determining which ancestor. And they will test the child. They'll send the child out on this journey to find an item that belonged to the previous incarnation that is buried. And then the child will find their way to it. And that's what will let them know that that is that ancestor. This is very similar to the same processes that Tibetans use in order to find the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. The Tibetans are connected to the Yoruba and Igbo and the Edo people of Benin via the D male haplogroup. Only 15% of the planet have DE, so that's either D or E haplogroup. These people were concentrated to the D's were in Nigeria, Tibet, the islands off the coast of India, as well as Japan. And it baffles scientists how that's even possible. The E haplogroup is it's all throughout Africa due to the Bantu migrations, but it was also in the Levant, Anatolia, which is now Turkey, as well as the Mediterranean. So the foundational, quote unquote, seafaring people, the sea people that were there in early Greece or whatever, that was these same groups, the E haplogroups. So that's why I tell you the Phoenicians are us, that's the Bantu. Okay, dokie. Let's see, I talked a little bit about why the world looks flat. If you have a flat plane that if you go off one edge, you appear on the other side, that is essentially a sphere. But you don't have to actually program a sphere. You can actually, like the game Asteroids, where if you go off one side of the screen, you come out on the other, whatever that. In your experience, that flat square is a sphere. So it's not that anybody's wrong. It's just that depending on what dimensional perception that you are able to view something in, it's either going to appear flat or as a sphere. But it does work kind of like video game dynamics. You can circumvent the transformation between a sphere and a torus, like having to destroy anything. You can circumvent that by cells. The word cell comes from the same etymology as both hell and cylinder. So all of these have to do with cover, conceal, and save. So your savior is related to all three of those things. All right. Kashi, that's the other stuff I was talking about, the Egg-Based Society. We already covered all that. Talked about the vulture, how Vega falls. All right. So Christ leaves Galilee and heads south. Because the Nile, like I said, it runs from Central Africa up to the Mediterranean. He wasn't falling. He wasn't descending. By him going south, he was actually ascending. So the quote unquote falling eagle, vulture, was actually being exalted. So the lifting up of the brass serpent, the Nehustan, that he talks about in John, is actually the descending of the eagle. So the raising, so as Kundalini rises, spirit comes down. Simple as that. You meet each other in the middle. All right, but that's all talking about Vega. Krishna explicitly identifies himself as Vega under the name Abhijit, which is the hidden or the intercalary one, because it guarantees victory if you attack during those periods. So you got to hide it away. One such period just happened to be when Nebuchadnezzar was destroying the Temple of Jerusalem. So, all right, we went through the whole naked thing, how naked. The semantics surrounding naked, how that's connected to both, how it's connected to night, how it's connected to Negro, how it's connected to Naga, is because, like I told you, night means to be made bare of the sun, to be made naked of the sunlight. And so it applies, so Naga, like so Elu is associated with elephant, but so is Naga. And so both a snake and an elephant and a human, I can include us in that too, have smooth skin. So that's where that semantic comes from. The association of those three things. All right. The Nun Ak, I talk about the light body. So when you bring the Ka, which is the personality that's projected onto the surface, you bring that together with the Ba, which is the Mamul. Then you have a body that allows you to still show up in the world after death. So it's like you're able to project yourself into this space, basically take a plasma body. Abara, I talked about that, It ends up giving you Hebrew, Eber. It ends up giving you Siberia. It ends up giving you Iberia. All of these are the same. Tiberius. Because of the way these letters transform into one another. I told you about Mu. Mu vegans having to do with water. Alright, and then Mizraim, the two straits. So that's what they were calling Egypt, but it was pretty much Mu. So once Mu civilization period was up, it was the Kusha period, which is Atlantis. Alright, Atlantis was Kush, the original Kusha. So Marrakesh, once you get up to northern Africa, that's the land, the children of Kush, the land of the gods. So we migrated over there to put that region, Libya they were calling it later. Alright, we're like characters being engraved in this reality relative to the Patrix, to the Father. I'll talk about the connections between the language, between Sumerian and Egyptian, and the semantics associated with that. A lot of this is preserved in old Chinese. The chanting of Om, it's actually 3 syllables, really 4 if you could count the nasalization at the end. You have to direct it at the solar plexus, heart region, and throat, respectively, in order to create the standing wave that allows you to concentrate that energy into the skull and then start solidifying the things that you are viewing. And that is pretty much what allows you to make the connection, that allows you to have OBE spontaneously without you requiring any type of chemical or drugs or whatever else. I can pretty much do it whenever I feel like it. If I lay down and I feel like doing it, but if I'm gonna do it for real, I like to prep first, make sure that I got my mind cleared throughout the day. I'm talking about like no TV, no social media. I increase my electrolytes throughout the day, because you're going to need some electrical energy in order to be able to sustain that state for a while, because that's, like I told you before, it is all plasma and ions and all that stuff. The word dragon comes from I see clearly. So what they're talking about in Revelation is, if you did not get properly initiated, if you did not prepare your body for all this additional visual information and electrical signals and ionic activity to enter your body, if we have a solar flare and there's more ionic activity going through your body than your brain can handle, you're going to start seeing crazy revelation looking shit. You're going to have kundalini sickness or whatever. You're going to have delusion. All right. And so this is what they tell you. It's talking about, once you understand, to you reunite with God is what yoga is supposed to mean. It's yoke, to re-yoke yourself to the source. No need for intermediaries, because all that confusing information in your head is going to make you pretty much go schizophrenic when this stuff starts happening, and it's pretty much inevitable. So that's why people are starting to see UFOs and all that stuff. It is mass schizophrenia that we cannot help. It's just how it works. Throwing them into the lake of fire, throwing clarity into the lake of fire gets rid of the false prophet. Your false understanding dissolves when you have the proper sight. So when heaven reappears on earth in the form of a ionically charged environment, you will not be deceived. For what I can tell, there are people who would benefit very highly from you not knowing that this is a thing, and this is why they keep on wanting to use nukes and keep on wanting to increase the ionic activity of this place so that they can project holograms. I'm about to wrap this up. Jenna, you my witness. You see how my feed did not cut off. You see how nothing like what happened in my other video happened. I didn't talk about the thing that I was talking about that day, so I'm pretty sure it has to do with a particular person and all of that. And it was my cue to be like, don't fuck up my mission, son. All right. But on that note, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.